Project for today is going to be continuing on this 97 Bearcat 454. In the last video we went through the carburetor and got it running, and we bandaged up this intake tube for the time being, but the choke cable here is busted. It's been broke for a long time, and then the choke lever up here is broken, so it should be a lever like this up here. But these pieces were fairly expensive at the time, so I never did fix it. I just would pull out on that to choke it. But now I've got some used pieces here. I've got some grips too to replace these. It's all used stuff that I got off of a wheeler that the transmission was bad on, so it wasn't worth fixing, so I ended up parting it out. But I saved the choke cable, which this plastic end that threads into the carburetor, this has better threads on it. The one on this is pretty stripped off. So, and then this runs up through underneath here, so we'll have to pop this grip off and pop the switches off here, and then we'll get this piece off, and then we'll have to route this cable down through there. This one's already missing the side panel, so it shouldn't be too bad to pull. There's a zip tie here, and then it runs through a little grommet here. So I'll get you set up and we'll get started. First thing I'm going to do is pull the choke cable out of the carburetor. It's kind of hard to get a wrench in here, but these are never very tight, so you can kind of get a long needle nose in here. And like I said, the threads were not very good on that, so it came out fairly easily. And I'll pull this plunger and the spring off of there, just so it doesn't fall off when we're fishing everything through. And like I said, I got a couple of zip ties to cut. Then we'll have to, there's a little ring here that all the cables go through. We'll have to fish it through there. And then up top, runs down through here. I'm hoping I could fish it down through without pulling the front fenders off, but we'll see what happens. So I've got all my zip ties cut, and I'm just gonna try pulling this down through. It might get caught up in the front there. That's kind of what I thought. It's getting caught on the... There's a loop up by the handlebars that it runs through. And I really didn't want to take the fenders off. I might have to take the gas tank loose and slide that backwards. I can see a little bit more up there. I think that's what I'll do. So I'll pull this air cleaner cover off. Then there's just two 10mm bolts on this tank. Slide that back a little. That gives us a little bit more access. You can see where this cable's coming through there. I'm gonna pull the couple of bolts here loose at the bottom of the fender too. These can be kind of tough to get out of there. That's why I try not to if I don't have to. That one came loose. A lot of times they break. They're down in all the muck and everything, so. Now that they're broke loose, I'll use the impact on them. There's a couple more underneath the fender here. That gives us a little bit more flex. Now this will flex up a little bit. It's still not giving us a lot. So I kept monkeying around with it. I finally got it out of there. You can see how this end was all busted, and then it was starting to come apart towards the end there by the carburetor side. And you can see those threads are pretty wore off on there. That's the downfall of these being plastic, where it goes into the carburetor. So now that was actually the easy part. Getting the new one fished down through there might not be quite as easy. But what I did was, there's a little clamp up here. I can't really get the camera in very good, but it's split. So I jammed the screwdriver down in there and I twisted, and it spread it open enough that I was able to slide that cable down through there. But fishing it back up might be a different story. So it's hard to get the camera down in there, but I have another Arctic here that's tore apart. I'll show you this little thing they have here to hold all the cables. You can see that it's split. So what I did was I spread it apart and just slid the cable in like that, and then I pushed this back out, and then I pulled it through and stuck it in there, and then I was able to fish it down through like that, which this is upside down, but I was just showing you how I got it into that clip. Because if you don't know that's like that, it's kind of tough when you're trying to just push it down through the side like that. But now we'll continue on. We'll have to thread that in the carburetor, and then we'll have to continue on up the handlebars. So I'll thread this in the carburetor first. I'm going to be careful not to cross thread them, which this one doesn't spin the easiest, so it's not easy to know if you are cross threaded or not. Well, I got it up in there, but I had to fight with it for a while. If any of you watching know of a specialty tool or anything that get up in here easier, I'm all ears, because these are always kind of a pain, and I haven't really found a good way to get them started. I ended up using this pliers here. It has the small ends on it, and then once it got to where I couldn't turn it with that anymore, then I just used the long needle nose. But there's always a risk you're going to cross thread them, and I think you end up having to buy a whole new choke cable if you want to replace just that plastic end there. So, but now we'll come up here and we'll pull this stuff apart up here to run our cable to. So first thing I'm going to do is take these screws. There's 2 screws underneath these switches. And then this kind of just peels apart. Pull that off, and then this is the part that we're replacing. And then I'm going to put a new hand grip on it too. This one's pretty well shot. So the trick with these hand grips, you want to get a screwdriver kind of under it to get it loose like that. And then take a blowgun. If you can get that fished underneath there a little bit, and just blow. And that'll push them right off. Especially these usually have glue in them, so that makes it a lot easier to get it off of there. So now that we got the grip off, we can pull this broken lever, choke lever, off of it. So you can see where this one was broke right there. It broke the whole lever off, and that happens a lot of times when that choke plunger gets seized into the carburetor and somebody tries yanking on the choke and it won't go, so they keep pushing and break it off, because these are actually pretty beefy, so it'd be kind of hard to break these off other than like rolling the machine or anything. So there's a part here for the cable to hook into, and that has to go towards the outside of the four-wheeler. We've got some remnants of glue on the end of here I'll have to clean off, because that doesn't want to fit on there. I'm just gonna wire wheel it real quick. And that slides on there good now. So there's a hole in the bottom of these switches. It's off to the side of the screw that you put in. So you gotta slide the cable up through there. And then it'll come out like that. And that has to hook into that lever. It's kind of hard to hold everything in place as you're putting it all together, but there we go. The choke has to be in the right place too. There's kind of notches where it lines up there. And then there's a hole in the handlebar we're lining up with too that makes it able to squish together. And then you have to push the little tab up that's on the choke cable. You might know I put my screws really far away and I'm holding all this stuff together. Get that started. Get another one in there. That should hold enough. I can grab the screwdriver. Then you want to make sure that the choke moves as it should. This was kind of a pain when it was cold out because this will actually hold the choke on for you while it's warming up, and I had to sit and actually hold out on that all the time. So this will be quite the upgrade. Now we'll slide that new grip on there. There we go. You can put, they do make glue, otherwise you can use like hairspray. Works pretty good actually for holding these on. But I usually don't glue them. Whatever residual glue is in there, it's pretty good. If they spin on you, then I'll glue them, but it just makes them more difficult to get back off if you glue them. And the slot that we're putting that cable in is like that, and then you can see how there's notches in this, so that's why I was having to get it in the right spot, because that's what stops it, so you can't go too far on the choke and it stops it on the way back up too. So we'll do that hand grip on the other side, and then I want to put some different rear tires on this thing. I've been having to air these up every day, so I want to, plus the tread's not that great on them. So I'll show you that trick here one more time of getting these off. This one's in worse shape than the other side. Get our screwdriver under there. Some of these can be pretty tough if somebody put a lot of glue in them. Let's see if that'll work. But that sure beats using I've used the vice grips on them, and usually if you want to save the grip, it's really nice because you don't end up wrecking it, but this one is pretty well wrecked anyway. And we'll slide our new one on here. There we go. So now I gotta put this gas tank back in there too. But that was just a couple of bolts here. I was putting the bolts back in the fenders here and I realized my shifter is extremely loose. I don't know if the splines wore out or if I'm going to be able to tighten this down. You don't want to go too much as you end up breaking that bolt off, but yeah, that's pretty loose. I'm not getting much tighter by tightening this down. Well, there it got tight. Just had to pull pretty hard on that. I don't like to go too tight on those because you end up busting that just a little tiny bolt in there with a 10mm head, but that's better. That should make it shift a little bit nicer. It probably wasn't getting the full throw in that shifter. But now we can move on to tires. These have some pretty bad cracking and stuff in them, and these have been on here since I bought the machine and they never leaked real bad even with the big cracks, so I'm guessing they have slime in them, so we'll probably have to deal with cleaning the rims up and everything. But I'll get it jacked up and we'll pull those off of there and then we'll get to replacing them. This one's got 14mm lug bolts. We'll see if this impact will take these off. We'll have to get the air impact. One thing I've noticed about that Bauer impact, it does seem like it's been losing a little bit of power, but I've had it for almost 2 years now. Oh boy, that's really stuck on there. I'll have to get a hammer for that. There we go. I don't know how good that picks up on camera, but you can see all the cracking in it. The other side is even worse. You can see some of those deep cracks in them and cuts and stuff. So it's surprising it's holding air. That's why I'm thinking that it has slime in it, but we'll see. We'll pop the valve stem core out of it. These rims are kind of backwards. It's dished in on the outside versus the inside. So when you go to put a tube in these, you have to put the tube in the opposite way because the valve stem is so far in there. And the way this is hard to pull out, I'm thinking there was slime in there. Usually it makes it tough. The valve stems get stuck in there. That bead broke pretty easily. Some of these can be pretty tough to break the beads on. That was the deep side too, so that's the harder side. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight tire changer. I try not to do a heck of a lot of tires. No matter what, it's a lot of physical work doing tires, even the little ones. I know, we can go pop that off. So I usually just like to do them with tire spoons. I don't use the top part of that tire changer. If I had it mounted to the floor, it might be a little bit easier, but most of these are not that difficult to do with tire spoons. That does not have slime in it. I'm actually shocked that that had air in it still with how many cracks were in that tire. But I'm glad I don't have to clean up that slime. The tires that I'm gonna put on it, those ones did have slime in them, so I had to sit and clean all that out of there. This does have a bunch of, it almost seems like dust from the tire. I wonder if it was from running it flat. Because we were out on the trails once and it was pretty low, I know, and my nephew was riding it and it probably got was spinning in the rim a little bit. So I got that rubber dust in there. I'll get that cleaned up and then we'll get putting the new tire on. So I got the rim cleaned up and I'll have to cut the valve stem off still, and then I usually spray the side of the tire that I'm sliding on with some soapy water so it slides on there a little bit easier. Now I'm going to be putting tubes in these. Whenever I put used tires on, whether they hold air or not, I like to put tubes in unless they're a pretty new tire, as I don't usually trust that they'll hold air. But the tubes have gotten fairly expensive, but I still like to use the more name brand tubes. I usually won't get like a cheaper off-brand tube. So for this one, I'm using a Kenda ATV tube. I've had good luck with these Kenda tubes. They seem like they're pretty thick rubber, where a lot of the ones nowadays are getting to be fairly thin. And then they've got the locking nuts on the valve stem, which I like. I don't really like for a drive tire. I don't really like putting a tube in that doesn't have these locking nuts on them, because sometimes if the tire gets low, it'll spin a little bit on the rim and you'll lose your valve stem out, and then it's really tough. You almost have to stab a hole in them to get the tube out of there if you lose your valve stems. You can't break the beads if there is still air in the tire. So normally I would put the tube in like this, but being we're doing this one backwards, I'm gonna flip it like that and put it in there. So I like to put it in the tire first, and then we'll try to get it on the rim, find out where my valve stem hole is here. Normally I line up the valve stem before I stuff it in the tire, but I did that in a hurry. Here it is. Probably can see it on camera. They do make like a tire spreader for putting tubes in and stuff, to make it easier. But these bigger tires aren't usually too bad. So now I'm gonna put this nut on. I'm gonna put this nut on loosely, just so I don't lose the valve stem as I'm tucking it around the rim. I'll lay it back down. and work it around. And I also like to put just a little bit of air in the tube before I start mounting the other side of the tire. It kind of helps it from getting pinched. It'll push it outside a little bit. You don't want a lot, just enough to inflate it a little bit. This tire did have slime in it, so there's still some residual stuff from that. There we go. And I do like to spray some soapy water around the bead. It helps it seat a little easier. One side went. This other side's being pretty stubborn. I've got close to 40 psi in there right now trying to pop the bead on this side. Well, I let it sit for a little bit thinking that it would pop that bead up, but it did drop in air pressure a little bit, so I'm going to add a little bit more air and see if we can get it to go. Usually it's about 36 psi they say to not go over to seat the beads on ATV tires, but I've gone up to about 40, but usually it's, you're risking having the tire blow up on you or something, so you don't really want to go too high on the pressure. But sometimes just leaving them sit for a little bit, they'll end up just, the pressure in there will make them pop all of a sudden. But I put this one back up to 40 and we'll let it sit a little bit again and see if it'll go. It did seem like it maybe is moving ever so slightly, so it will finally pop eventually, but I'm just going to let it sit instead of going too crazy on the air pressure. So I let it sit for a while with 36 psi in it, and it's just not going, so we're just going to, I don't recommend pumping it up higher than what it says, but we're going to try putting some more in there and seeing what happens. It's got to go at some point. I just don't want to pop the tube by putting too much air pressure in it. I have had them where they're so stubborn, especially these old tires with the rubber gets kind of stiff and they'll get hard to seat the beads on, where I've had them where I've had to re-break the bead on one side and then air it up again to get it to go, but I'm hoping I don't have to do that with this one. I can't believe it's not popping. I have it at like 45 psi, so we're almost 10 over what it says on the tire. It's moving a little bit, but it's ever so slowly. It's going to be quite a bang, I think, once it actually goes. There it goes. Finally. That was one of the more stubborn ones I've ever had. I let the air out of it right away. I had it up close to 50 psi before it went. Now I can throw this side back on and you got one to go. That's quite an improvement over these Carlisles that were on there. Not a huge fan of these Carlisles. Even when they're new, they don't seem to get the best traction. This is a little bit more aggressive with the wider tread. These probably are only at about 50% of the tread though. It's kind of hard to pick up on camera. Tires always seem to look like they're not as good on camera as in real life, but we'll get this other side popped off. I'll just kind of speed through this side since we took a while on that other one. Hopefully the bead seat's easier on this side. Alright, I got both the tires on. We got the choke cable fixed. And we got the new hand grips on it. In the last video the brakes were sticking a little bit, but I took this line off thinking maybe this rubber line was bad, or if there was some gunk in there or something that was plugging it, and it looked okay, but I put it back on and then they seemed to work fine after that. So we'll test that out a little bit more and see if that's a problem. Now I got matching set of tires on here. This was some tires I had on a Polaris Sportsman that I parted out. It had been run out of oil, so it was pretty well junk, the motor was, so it wasn't really worth repairing. So I ended up taking the good bits off of it. But we'll go take this for a test drive and see how these new tires work. Well, I've got it out back here by the sand pit, and we'll see how it does doing some hill climbing. Well, they seem to perform pretty good. I've never climbed that in the winter time. Usually it's summer, it's a lot softer, but the sand's all frozen right now. It's single digits out here, so that's why I thought I better put a helmet on. The ground's pretty hard if I flip the thing or anything. So, but that's gonna do it for this one. If you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.